All right, we are now live and recording. So again, welcome to today's Intacct CloudBytes presentation. Bank reconciliation can be fun. And we're happy to bring this to you today as part of our monthly CloudBytes series. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you find it enlightening and something that you can use in your everyday going forward. So without further ado, we will jump right in. And I will tell you, by the way, I apologize, if you have questions, you should have a go-to webinar control panel on your screen, and there should be a questions area and a chat area. You're more than welcome to populate either one, and I will watch for those and respond to them when they come through. All right, so just to kind of get things started, since you all are in listen-only mode, if someone would please post either in chat or questions that you guys can hear me, I would appreciate that. All right. Loud and clear. Fantastic. Thank you very much. All right. So let's get started then, shall we? First, we're going to do a little bit of an introduction, tell you a little bit about our company and myself, and then we'll jump into the actual presentation. So you may, and I introduce us because you may wonder what gives me the right to do this presentation for you. Well, Massey Consulting is an accounting software reseller. We're based in Raleigh, North Carolina, one of the most beautiful places in the world to live. The company itself was founded in 2002. We are comprised of CPAs and accountants. We all have accounting degrees. We all know our debits from our credits, can read financial statements, and the like. We also have numerous technical certifications amongst our staff. We have folks that are certified in the Intacct platform for development, and we have folks that are certified in the Intacct web services for integration components as well with other systems. We are an Intacct Premier Partner. We were one of the original group of Intacct Premier Partners when they started that designation back in 2013. And we have been in Intacct President's Club twice, 2014 and 2015. We did miss it last year, but knock on wood, we are on track again to make it in 2017 if the stars align and everything falls in our favor. We're also a Microsoft Gold certified partner for Dynamics GP. We are ranked in the top 300 small businesses in the Southeast USA. And we are regular contributors to the NCA CPA blog, ERP software blogs, a number of different third-party vendor blogs. We try to contribute as much as we can across the internet to extol the virtues of the Intacct application. And a little bit about me. I was founded in 1970. I do have a degree in accounting. I've been a CPA in North Carolina since 1994, which, if I really sit and think about that, that is a lot longer than you realize. But anyway, I am Intacct certified. I am Microsoft Dynamics GP certified. I have been Microsoft SQL certified. I am not currently Microsoft SQL certified, but I have been twice in my life. I'm a guest speaker at Intacct events. I have been a guest speaker at various other CPA events, including the NCA CPA, and I have blogged for the NCA CPA and a few other websites as well myself. So that's a little bit about us, a little bit about me. Let's jump into the stuff you really care about. So at the end of today's session, you'll be familiar with the key areas of bank reconciliation. You'll understand how to troubleshoot when you're not in balance. You'll understand options to fix entries done in error, and you'll get a few tips and a couple of tricks while we're going through it, but no bad tricks. I'll try to keep them all good, right? So let's start off with something that's very basic. What is a bank reconciliation? Well, a bank reconciliation is a process of tying what you get from the bank to what you have in your ledger and vice versa. so that you make sure that all of your transactions are recorded, and ultimately that your balance sheet and P&L are in the shape that they should be in, right? Everything is correct, the bank is correct, nobody missed anything. You didn't make a $50,000 deposit that the bank somehow lost or something of that nature. You're tying everything back from one to the other. Now, I wanted to get a poll in here for you guys, and I missed doing that, and I apologize for that. But let me just get a silent show of hands, which of course I can't see. So we'll call this a virtual show of hands of, you know, how many people feel this way when you start to do your bank reconciliation. Yeah, I know I do typically when I'm doing a bank reconciliation. And I feel that way certain times throughout the day, most days anyway. So it's not that bank rec's that bad for me. I just feel that way a lot of times anyway. So if they make you feel that way, hopefully by the end of the presentation, we will fix that for you. So when we talk specifically about the Intacct bank rec, some key areas to keep in mind: the beginning balance cutoff date. When you're starting up a bank reconciliation, it's the date before you go live, and this only appears on the first bank reconciliation. So after you get this, there are a few things that show up on the first one that don't show up subsequently. For example, in the screenshot you see there, it plainly tells you this is your first reconciliation. Enter the following information. So that's a pretty good indicator. This is your first one. And there are a few other things that we'll see as well. Another one of the key dates is the statement ending date. The reconciliation mode, which defaults from your bank setup and can be changed on a bank-by-bank basis, can be changed on a reconciliation-by-reconciliation basis. So not only can you have different defaults for different bank accounts, but you can do it in different ways, different months. If you really want to jazz up your bank reconciliation, maybe you do an auto match one month. Maybe you do it manual the next month, right? Keep it spicy, keep it changed up so that bank rec becomes fun, right? Keeps you guessing as to how this is going to happen. But those are some of the key fields there, key areas in the system. Your cutoff date, your ending date, your reconciliation mode, and we'll talk a little bit more about those as we get throughout the presentation here. So again, on your first bank reconciliation, there is a concept of initial open items, right? You're converting over from, let's say, QuickBooks or maybe Dynamics GP. You're converting over to Intacct, and you're going to get this first reconciliation done. But you've got some outstanding items from the old system that you need to bring in. So there's a button here, a blue button here at the bottom left of the screen that will allow you to do that, allow you to import those initial open items so that they'll be there for you when you do your reconciliation. They don't have any effect on the general ledger, and they're just purely into the system so that you can start working. Okay. And then, of course, the statement ending balance, right? That's a key one. On the right-hand side in red, statement ending balance. That is something that you definitely need in order to be able to tie back to what the bank says you have in your account. Some additional key areas. Once we get past that first screen, book balance reflects the amount shown, reflects the amount as shown on the general ledger on the statement ending date. Will not include any initial open items or the compensating entries for those initial open items. And again, that only comes into play with the first bank rec that you do. So the key component here is the book balance, which is the one showing in the upper right here, 2,975. That is showing your book balance. The adjusted book balance is the same number except for the fact that it includes adjusting entries. Keep in mind at Intacct, they have a concept of a journal entry in the general ledger, and they have a concept of an adjusting journal entry in the general ledger, and those are two different types of transactions Therefore, in bank rec, we are showing two different numbers in the system, potentially, if you do indeed use the adjusting journal entries. Amount to reconcile. So again, here, when you get on this last screen, that's probably one of your most important numbers, is this amount to reconcile here. This is the amount remaining that you need to resolve in order for your books to match your bank and finish the reconciliation. In order to finish a reconciliation, the amount to reconcile should equal 0. So a bank rec example, bank reconciliation steps. Gather the needed bank statement. So that's your first step, obviously, right? You want to gather that bank statement. And I'm going to come back to the example at the end. Sorry, I kind of skipped through that. I meant to change that the image around a bit. But I'll come back to that at the end and show you the actual application. Gather the needed bank statement. Set up the bank account in Intacct. Is it at the top or is it at an entity level? And that's a key question along with most things in Intacct. Are these going to be at the top or are they going to be at the entity level? And in a lot of cases, those bank accounts wind up at the entity level because they may be specific to that entity. They may be specific to a bank, a general ledger account number in that entity, or what have you. You truly can put them in either place, but a lot of times they do wind up being at an entity level. Now, they always have to be tied to an entity. So that's one thing to keep in mind, but they can be at either physical level within the organization. Format any bank information you might need, import that into Intacct, populate all the needed fields in the Intacct bank rec screen, import any bank rec information as needed, add attachments, clear bank items as needed, reconcile, and review the reconciliation history report. So this is a list of things that need to be done during a bank reconciliation. And some of these won't be each time. Obviously, you won't set up the bank account each time, but you will potentially import your match transactions if you do an auto match bank reconciliation. And then you may attach attachments to attach documents, copies of the bank reconciliation, things such as that, which I'm actually excited to show you one thing in here because I did not know that. Something special about the attachments. I didn't know that until I was going through this training material. So you can teach an old dog new tricks in some cases. So, but these are the steps that you would go through in a bank reconciliation from start to finish. So let's take a look at some of these things. Here's, for example, the general ledger report. And this is run on the cash account. So this is showing you all of the transactions that have been keyed into and put into your cash account during a certain period. So that's a handy report to have. Entering data for initial open items, and this relates to the contra, the auto contra, which is a transaction. So on your initial bank reconciliation entry into Intacct, what Intacct does is you're putting these transactions into the system to get them in there to affect your bank reconciliation. However, Intacct creates an auto contra transaction that wipes those out so that you have no net effect on the general ledger. So as you can see here in this particular example, we've put in 2 initial open items into the system, and these 2 open items, one is a deposit, one is a check, they net to $1,377, which happens to be the auto contra entry here that's made on 3/31 to balance those out. Compensating initial open items entry must be cleared on first reconciliation, right? So that's part of the initial bank reconciliation process. You won't see this every time, but it is part of that initial process. And it's important to note for companies that are getting started on the Intacct solution, or even just getting started on the bank reconciliation. Okay. The dates of the initial open items, the dates must be on or before the beginning balance date. If not, the below error appears. Essentially what that's saying is that if you remember, one of the fields you have to populate in your initial bank rec entry is the beginning date of the reconciliation. And if you're going live on April 1st, then your beginning date will be March 31st. Therefore, all transactions have to be, initial open item transactions have to be dated prior to or on March 31st. Otherwise, the system will give an error and you will have to go back and correct the dates of those transactions. So we've talked about the auto contra. Something that's very similar to that is the auto entry. This also is done during the first reconciliation as well. So you've got these two sort of offsetting entries here that are made during that initial reconciliation process. And this just helps you keep the book straight, helps you make sure that things are working in the proper order. Okay. So troubleshooting some key areas. Amount to reconcile is not zero after all required entries have been cleared. So a couple of things to do. If you're going through bank rec and you've worked all the way down to the end, you've checked all the deposits, you've checked off all the checks, but the amount to reconcile still doesn't equal zero. Well, validate that correct dates are used on the initial screen. So your beginning balance cutoff date, your statement ending date, etc. Validate that those dates are indeed correct. For the initial one, have you cleared the auto entry and auto contra entries? Make sure that those are cleared off the system, otherwise you won't balance down to zero. Run a general ledger report for the bank's cash account using the system reporting period of inception to date, and look for future dated transactions. Somebody accidentally keyed in 2018 instead of 2017, and you had the period open and Intacct, and it was able to post to it, then they may have done that. Compare the trial balance, general ledger, and book balance for the same bank account. Do they all agree? If you're in cash and accrual environment, ensure your default reporting method is set to accrual. And that's extremely important and often overlooked in an environment where you have both cash and accrual accounting. And that's a flip switch inside of Intacct so that you can run in both cash and accrual basis. And if you don't have your default reporting set to accrual, then there can be some transactions that may not show up at the appropriate time inside bank rec, which would throw you off. Okay. The bank book balance does not match the general ledger balance. Why? So these two amounts will not always match. That's just not going to happen. There may be checks that you have written, for example, that are in your book balance, but they may not have cleared the bank yet. So that's going to be part of it. Bank reconciliation pulls transactions based on the document date, whereas the general ledger pulls transactions based on the GL posting date. The two reports do not have to match in order for you to reconcile your bank account, and oftentimes will not match. So that is talking about a case of inside of Intacct, where running the reports in certain ways, you could pull transactions into one report and not pull them into the other. And it's based on the dates. So transactions could come into the bank and not into the general ledger, or vice versa, based on those posting dates and the periods that you're looking for. Okay. If the trial balance and the GL do not balance for the same bank account, below are some steps. Ensure you are using the exact same filters for each report. So if you run a trial balance report out of Intacct and you run a general ledger report out of Intacct and they don't balance, make sure you're using the same filters. You're not excluding certain departments or dimensions or anything of that nature, because keep in mind that inside of Intacct, those dimensional values flow all the way through the system. So that means that even in a checking situation, let's say for one of my own examples, we have payments maybe that come from customers that could be past due, right? Got one the other day from an invoice back in 2016, and it was a project that we had already completed. They just hadn't paid one of the invoices yet. I reminded them about that, and they did send the check in. But that project had already been closed. And so when I went to go make a deposit, I had to open that account back up so that I could post that deposit into the system, or open the project back up so I could post that deposit into the system, because it does have to maintain that integrity for those dimensional values, and those dimensional values go all the way down into your cash accounts. So make sure you're using the same filters. There are a number of articles in the community. If you haven't gotten into the Intacct community, I highly encourage you to either contact us or someone else in your organization for a login to the Intacct online community, assuming you're customers. I think we do have a few folks in here that might be prospects, but assuming you're a customer, you will have access to the Intacct community, and there are a number of really good articles on the community about bank reconciliation. Creating a document showing all the steps you've done to date, provide screenshots where needed, and submit a case to our support staff, or your support staff as the case may be. Okay. Fixing entries done in error. Can I reverse entries made during the bank reconciliation? The short answer here is yes. And notice it says reverse. It doesn't say delete, it says reverse. Entries using the quick links in the bank reconciliation can be reversed by going to cash management, reports, bank register. You run the report for the date of transaction. To the right of the transaction will be a reverse link. Note, however, that the bank reconciliation must be open. So then that begs the question of, can I reopen a bank reconciliation? And the answer to that is yes. If you click Reconcile Bank or Reconcile Credit Card, enter the necessary information, click Continue, and on the resulting screen will be Reopen Last Reconciliation. If more than one reconciliation needs to be open, you need to open them one at a time. You can't go back several months and open them all at once. You have to open each last reconciliation. And what that does is it just reverses the status of the bank reconciliation from completed to open. It doesn't change anything in your books. It just simply reopens that bank reconciliation so that you can make any adjustments that you need to make. Intacct will warn you you're attempting to save or reopen bank rec that may have one or more supporting documents attached. Right? Sample message would be attachment document with ID 12 will need to be reviewed. If any changes are made, determine if the attachment is still relevant. So again, that's a warning message saying, hey, there's something attached to this bank reconciliation. You're reopening it, so you need to make sure that whatever you do doesn't render this attachment useless. Okay. Fixing entries done in error. Removing old entries entered in the initial open item screen of bank rec. Once the first reconciliation is completed, these entries cannot be removed, and a journal entry to reverse the old check will need to be created. So let's say you import transactions into the system, you do your bank reconciliation, everything ties out, and you complete it, And then the next month they come back and say, no, these other 3 transactions that you didn't reconcile last time actually should not have been imported into the system. You can't take them out. You would want to create a manual reversing entry, whether that's a general ledger entry or whether that's something done through the bank reconciliation module, cash management module. Either way, you would just need to create a reversing entry and then reconcile the 2 of them on the next statement to get them to go away. Reversing charges and fees entered during a charge card or bank reconciliation. This can be done in either the bank interest and charges screen or the credit card charges and other fees screen, or the bank register or the credit card register reports as well. So that actually has a number of different areas. And one of the things that a lot of people forget about within Intacct, and if I could just take a moment here on this, is that in a number of cases, when you are running a report in Intacct, like in this example here of the bank register and the credit card register, in a number of those types of reports, those are actually functioning reports. So as we alluded to in one of the previous slides, if you run a bank register to the screen, you will then be presented to, along with the information, you'll be presented with a link to click on to reverse, to create a reversing transaction for that particular item. So if you get to the point of, oh, this mistakenly got keyed in twice, this credit card charge or this debit card charge got keyed in twice, you can run one of the register reports, and at the end of that line for that item, you'll actually see a link to reverse it, and you can do it right there in that screen. It'll pop up a little window. You can populate the additional information needed to do the reconcile, and it will, or the reverse, and it will process that. What that leaves you with then in the bank reconciliation is it leaves you with the original transaction sitting there as well as a reversing transaction. So you would simply click both and check them both off. What if I need to make changes to my bank account? You know, the short answer here is, you know, no. In a lot of cases, it depends on what that change is. If it's not anything that's terribly identifying with it, then you can usually make those changes. But once your bank account has transactions against it, you need to modify the bank account ID or want to inactivate the bank account and use that same GL account on a new ID. No, you can't do that. Well, technically you can, I guess, but Intacct always recommends, as do we, that you create a new bank account ID and create a new general ledger account associated with this new bank account ID. So you go from banking with Bank of America to banking with PNC Bank or First Citizens or SunTrust, someone like that. You would logically then want to create a new general ledger account code. You would want to create a new bank account code within the system, marry those two together, and not just make changes to your existing bank account. You want to start fresh, do some type of transfer transaction from one account to the other to account for the money moving inside of Intacct, and work from scratch with that. What if I created my bank account at the top and it should have been at the entity? It can't be moved if you've already got transactions and you just want to move it. You would actually need Intacct engineering to move it from the top to the entity or vice versa, and that would be a charge associated with that. Now you could take the previous slide queue and create a new bank ID and a new GL account and work with it that way, set up in the appropriate fashion. But to move one from the top level to the entity is an Intacct engineering feat that would need to be done. When reconciling a bank account, the checks, debits, and deposit credits fields appear blank. Sometimes that can be caused by the sorting on your bank rec, so you just want to make sure that it is sorting by date in there. Try, fiddling with that sorting and change that around a bit. And then also that has been known to happen more on Google Chrome than either on Firefox or any of the other supported browsers. Just happens to be something about Google Chrome that on rare occasion makes those fields blank. And they're not actually blank, it's just they are not illuminated. If you were to stare at the screen hard enough, you would see the numbers, but they are very difficult to see. All right, some tips and tricks, rolling through some slides here. So here's the one that I was unaware of until I started going through this particular presentation, getting this information together. Attachments can be added after the bank reconciliation has occurred. So if you pull up reconciliation histories, the history window for bank reconciliations, as you can see at the end of the arrow here, there is an attach button or an attach link. And as it states here, you can drag and drop. I have not yet tried the drag and drop, but I have clicked on attach and attached copies of the bank rec to the bank statement to a bank rec. If you're like me, what I find is that as I'm going through the bank reconciliation process, I often get both relieved and excited when I get to the end of the process and the reconcile amount is equal to 0, and I can click that reconcile button. I'm glad I'm done, and I hit the reconcile button, and then I think, gosh, that would have been nice to put a copy of the bank rec statement there and attach it to the actual bank reconciliation so that when the CPA firm asks me for backup behind the reconciliation, I can say, well, it's right here. I've got it attached. Don't have to go trying to dig for it. The bank will keep them for a certain period of time free for you to be able to grab off the internet now usually, but I think it's typically no more than about 16 to 18 months that is available without having to pay to get a back copy of a statement. So it's great. You can actually attach them here after the fact. Just pull up your reconciliation history, find the appropriate reconciliation, and attach the document. And this is an often overlooked area within the Intacct system. Your reconciliation report can be rerun from here, as well as your outstanding items report can be rerun from here as well. So both of these can be reproduced after the fact. Which is nice because I know there's a number of ERP systems out there that don't let you rerun them after the reconciliation's been completed. So that's nice to have. So are your users restricted? If a bank account exists at the top and the user is restricted to certain entities, you'll get an error message. Form can't be processed, you can't reconcile, you have to log in or slide into the entity to reconcile. So if something is existing at the top, the user is restricted to certain entities in a multi-entity environment. They can only get to 1 or 2 or 3 different entities, then they are not going to be able to get in and help with that bank rec. So that's a consideration for whether you put that bank at the top or do you put that bank at the entity level. How are your users going to be set up? How are your users going to be configured? Where are they going to have permissions to within your Intacct instance in your organization? The behavior occurs due to the entity restrictions on the user. To resolve the issue, remove the entity restrictions from the user record. In other words, give them access to the top level if you wish them to be able to do that. Or perhaps you should create the bank account at the entity level. And those are things to consider really ideally as you're going through the setup process as opposed to discovering this after the fact. That's not the greatest time to do that, discover that after the fact. So, okay. So dates matter. validate dates as future data transactions can affect your reconciliation. Dates do matter. If you accidentally post something in on 4/21/2018, then it's not going to show up in your bank reconciliation. If you even just fat finger it a little and do 4/24/2017 or 4, whatever it may be, then it may be that those transactions don't show up in bank reconciliation simply because they have their future dated, they have a bad date on them, and that can affect things. Absolutely. Bank reconciliation templates, what are they? So there's a couple of templates to talk about with bank reconciliation. One of the first big ones is the initial open items template. And again, this is only something that you would use when you are first going into the bank reconciliation module in Intacct, but this would give you the ability to import outstanding items as of a go-live date so that you can begin to do that transaction. And you do have the ability, so if you are in the Intacct bank rec screen and you click on the initial open items button here, it will pop up this screen that we're showing, and in red at the top of the screen, it does show upload template for initial open items. And that'll give you the template for how your CSV file needs to look once you have that populated. You would come back to this same window, click browse, and upload that data into the system. Okay, so that then is the template for loading initial open items. So the bank reconciliation or the bank transaction file template, this comes in handy when you're doing auto match or auto match with review reconciliation modes. What this is your ability to import matched transactions. We have customers that might go out to their bank website. They may pull down a CSV file of all the transactions that have occurred since the last reconciliation, take that file, format it into the way that Intacct needs it to be, and then import that file in under the auto match or auto match with review provisions. And what's the difference between auto match and auto match with review? Well, to validate deposits on allows the user to set the criteria for matching deposits on the uploaded statement to deposit in the system. Validate checks then allows the user to set the criteria for matching checks. So the auto match will use the criteria for validating deposits and checks and will match those. And if it gets everything matched and comes back to a 0, then it will complete the reconciliation. Auto match with review will do everything it can to match those transactions, but will not process the reconciliation. It will give you that ability to review those transactions prior to committing them and doing the reconciliation and things like that. So auto match automatically takes care of them as much as it possibly can. Auto match with review will give you the ability to match them, but will also require that you review it to confirm them before moving forward. So again, the bank transaction file template here will give you the ability to import transactions against your bank rec for matching purposes. So you can do that inside of Intacct. Bank reconciliation reports, often overlooked, cash management, reconciliation histories. Reports cannot be accessed via the reports module. Not the reports module, but you can go through cash management. So the reconciliation report is the entire list of transactions that you cleared or remain open. Information about the entire reconciliation, including the open balance. It's basically, like it says, it's your reconciliation report. It recaps everything about that particular reconciliation. What cleared, what didn't clear, what were your balances, all of those things, what's left, you know, in the system. The other is the outstanding items report. It's a list of transactions that were not cleared in this bank rec process. Also shows the opening balance, the book balance, the ending balance, and the uncleared balance, which of course the outstanding items should equal the uncleared balance. So those two reports, the reconciliation report and the outstanding items report, can only be accessed through cash management reconciliation histories. They can't be run through the reporting module. The bank account templates can also be found on the company setup checklist. So here, if you want to import in checking accounts, if you're a large organization and you may have 10 or 12 checking accounts, then you would be able to import that list of checking accounts, create the bank accounts, imports in the routing and account numbers and all those different things. It facilitates the setup of those checking accounts. Same for savings accounts, and actually same for charge card accounts as well. So, and a lot of this applies to charge card reconciliations and charge card management as well. So it's not just banks, but charge cards. Can you reconcile more than one time per month? Yes, you can. You can reconcile daily if you wish. You may want to save daily and only reconcile monthly, but that choice is up to you. You would just simply control your dates, your statement ending date, your bank ending date, stuff like that. You would simply control those to a day-by-day level. But you may only want to reconcile monthly because there may be such things as chargebacks, you know, NSF checks, things like that, that you may need to take into account, and reconciling monthly gives you more flexibility in that. Bank rec and credit card reconciliations work the same, except when they're related to IGC. This is the Intacct Global Consolidations module that we're speaking of here. Most companies typically don't have that. If you're dealing with international sales or something of that nature, then you may have it, but there are certain nuances between the IGC companies and non-IGC companies. Can I enter negative values on an import? Yes, you can. Automatch files can use negative values. So a negative value could potentially be a refund on a debit card transaction, putting the money back in your account. You know, there are ways around those types of transactions as well, but it will accept negative values on your import. And actually in the auto match process import, you can have those negative values. Intacct will still treat them correctly. Okay. So a couple things here in the appendix. Initial open items for a bank account. This is a sample, so it's just showing here sort of how that file might look. Column C, check debit or deposit credit, and then column D, amount should always be positive here, the payee and the description. So it's a pretty simple file to get in your initial open items, and then you can see down here at the bottom you are given that information back to you so that you can verify that what came in correctly, or what came in correctly inside the system. Bank rec view of the initial open items for a bank account. So this is a view of the debits and credits. And you can see here there's an auto contra entry down here at the bottom, some additional entries up here at the top, but this is just showing you the bank rec view of those initial open items. Automatch with review sample. So here's a sample of that file. Automatch with review. You've got withdrawals should be entered as negative amounts. Deposits should be entered as positive amounts. So here's two withdrawals checks, document number 78 and 79, those amounts, and then here's a deposit of that amount. So it's just showing you an example of a file. And then auto match with review. So basically what you get in this case matches what it can from the bank account items to items imported from the file. Intacct matches on check or document number, amount, and posting date. Remaining entries can be manually matched up inside the system once Intacct has had its best shot at it. Okay. So with all that being said, we've got a few minutes here, let's just take a live look, and I'm going to end this slideshow momentarily. Okay. And I am going to pull up Intacct, and we're going to get logged in here, and I'm going to show you the bank reconciliation module. So give me just one moment while I do that here, and I'll bring this over to that monitor so that you can see it. Okay. So I'm in Intacct. We're looking at a dashboard, but I'm going to go to Cash Management, and I'm going to go down here to Reconcile Bank. So is this the first attempt at doing a reconciliation for this company? It's not, right? Because one, we don't see the yellow box up here that says Initial Bank Reconciliation. And we also don't see Initial Open Items as a button down here in the lower left. Let's see if I change to SunTrust. It does come up. So this is the first reconciliation for SunTrust. Enter the following information. And then here's the Initial Open Items button, as well as here is the beginning balance cutoff date. So I could set this perhaps to 3/31. And then I can come into my Initial Open Items, and I can either add them one by one, or I can import them into the system. Okay. So that's an initial one. If I come back to our Chase corporate account, we are set to auto match with review. And that's why you see a few different fields up here. And if I change this to manual, you'll see that those fields actually go away. It becomes a much simpler screen at that point. But then these are all manual adjustments or manual matching that needs to be done within the bank rec. If I flip back to auto match with review, here's my button to upload a bank transaction file. Here's how I want to validate my deposits based on amount and date. If I want to add an additional field, I can. Document number, for example, I can add that. Here's my last reconcile date and my statement ending date. Sort by the transactions in the screen. How do I want them sorted? How do I want them grouped? Over here, validate checks. Statement beginning balance, statement ending balance, book transaction columns, and then here is your first opportunity to add an attachment to the system. If I switch this back to manual, and I'm going to put in 25, and then I'm going to hit continue. So I've checked my statement ending date, I put in a ending balance, and now this brings me into the screen. So first thing here, there's our reopen last reconciliation button. Okay. Here's our reconciliation history button. If I click this, here are my previous reconciliations, and notice here's my attach. Here's my recon report and my outstanding items report. So if I were to click the attach, it's going to bring up a screen where I can add my attachment in here. If I were to click one of the others, it would run the report for me that we had talked about. Now, one of the coolest features, and I know that's not a high-tech term, nor is it a sophisticated accounting term, But one of the coolest features of the Intacct Bank Rec, coming from someone who is in a Great Plains world, is this little sidebar up here called Quick Links. And for example, if I wanted to add interest and charges, I can click here and it will pop up a window that allows me to add service charges and interest. If I want to create a journal entry, let's say I forgot to book something, I want to create a journal entry, I could create that entry. It's going to take me straight to the journal screen. If I wanted to do a manual payment, another receipt, make deposits, transfer funds, select to pay, apply payments, etc., all of these options are available from here. I'm not leaving this screen. I'm not leaving this reconciliation. It's right here at my fingertips. Okay. As I come down, what I would do is check boxes. Right? Check boxes. If I have a large number of checks or documents to clear, I can say from number 18 through number 32 and clear them, and it will check the boxes. And I can also unclear those things as well. If I scroll down a little bit more, here's the deposits and credits, and we're able to do the same functions and do the same things for those deposits and credits as well. Okay. Coming back up here to the top, there's some buttons right up here. Save and continue, which allows me to save and continue. I can hit save and then keep doing what I'm doing. So if I get to a certain point in the bank rec where I've checked off a large number of things, I may want to do a save and continue. I can keep working, but it will keep my progress where it's at. I can do a save and print, which will print the information out for me as well. I can do a save and close. So if I've gotten to a certain point in here and I need to speak with someone else about a transaction or do some more research, excuse me, maybe I want to do a save and close and come back to this reconciliation later. I can also do a refresh. Let's say I've got a number of transactions to enter into the system. Another way of doing it is to open up another Intacct window here, come over into this particular Intacct window, enter in those transactions that you need to put in. Perhaps they are charge card transactions. Put those into the system, and then come back over here and refresh, and all those transactions will appear. And then, of course, here's our great and wonderful reconciliation button, where we can come in and complete the reconciliation process. You do have to be at an amount to reconcile equal to 0 before you can click the reconciliation button. But once you have that, you can then click the reconciliation button. Okay? And the last one is our cancel button. Okay. So if we look at a couple other things really quick here, we've got some reports. There is a bank register. So let's run a bank register. And I'm going to say it is for, where is my inception to date? And we're going to run it for the Chase account. And there's a few other things on the screen that you could select, trimming your amount of data or what have you. But I'm just going to hit view because I want this to get up on the screen. Okay. So here's a list of transactions. I can scroll down. I can see all those transactions. Notice that on some occasions here, like this one, I can click void and void the transaction. If I keep going down, I see voids, I see reverses. So again, this is a case where I can run a so-called report, but because we're in Intacct, because this is generated as HTML and it's interactive, I can then click on these different things and make something happen, voiding and reversing transactions. So that's something that takes a little bit sometimes to get used to. You can actually run reports and then use those reports to process transactions within the bankrec module. Okay. All right. So that's what I wanted to show you. I'm going to pop right back over here again. And I'm just noticing that there is a mistake on this next slide. I apologize for that. This is actually talking about our previous CloudBytes session on going paperless. It's not our next one. Obviously, this is in March. Check our website. We are adding these events to our website. We're actually revamping our website completely over the next few weeks and hope to have it finished, if not mid-June, then have it finished by, or mid-May, then have it finished by early June. But we will be consistently advertising these out to you and having additional sessions as well. I think our next one might be on the new audit features within Intacct. So that'll be something to look out for. And we're going to continue to have these on a monthly basis. So just look for emails, look for ways to register, social media posts, things like that. Or quite frankly, just give us a call. But thank you for coming today. I really appreciate your time. I hope it's been worth the hour that we spent together. If you have any additional questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to let me know, and we'll be glad to answer you or help you with your bank reconciliations, and hopefully make them fun, right? So, or at least not pulling your hair out with them. Okay. So thank you again for the time today, and I really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you next month. Have a good day.